What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 12 of Bound to Improve. My name is Lennon Ower.
And I'm Chris Pound. The book that we decided to read this week was The Courage to Be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi. Before we kind of get into that, let's talk about the implementation from last week's Tom Brady TB12 method.
Yeah, so mine was the main concept of the book, which was pliability, which is that daily lengthening and softening of your muscles. And what I said I was going to do is just incorporate pliability into my workout routine. So far, it takes up a lot more time, but I think it's going to be beneficial in the long run. And I've felt some minor improvements in like my lower back pain. So we'll see like if I keep implementing it, if it continues to help in the long run.
Yeah, for mine, it was just to be kind of more mindful about the amount of water that I'm consuming per day. And I've definitely been a little bit better at it, not nearly as much as I think I should be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
going forward, you think you're going to
try to drink 3 or 4 of these a day? I think this is like 32 ounces, which puts me right about a gallon. So the little improvements every day will continue to kind of grow exponentially, I think, and that's kind of the goal that I have.
Yeah. I think it's just something you got to keep reminding yourself of.
Yeah, definitely.
Like throughout the day, like multiple
absolutely.
times. Awesome. So jumping into the summary of the book. So how this book was kind of structured was it was more of a conversation between a philosopher and more of a younger kid who had questions about life in general. So it was broken up into 5 nights, with each night kind of tackling a different subject, you could say.
Yeah. Going on from here, the first introduction and the first night, the whole idea is to deny trauma. The world and life are inherently simple if you really think about it. We live in a subjective world shaped by our meaning and the perspective. So kind of for an example here, the temperature of well water feels different in summertime as it does in the winter. And just keeping that in mind, you'll be able to kind of understand how simple life really is if you break it down step by step. And we'll kind of get into that.
Yeah, and it's like all through the lens of what glasses you're looking through. So how you choose to see the world is how it kind of reflects onto you. So the main principles that Ichiro uses throughout this book is from a type of psychology called Adlerian psychology from the psychologist Alfred Adler. And he was along the lines of, he was kind of Freud and Jung were like kind of like the 3 top dogs in the industry back then. So, and his psychology more aligned with like more of the Greek philosophy. So think like Plato, Socrates.
The next topic here was trauma and its interpretation. Freud viewed trauma as the source of unhappiness, while Adler argued that meaning we assign to experiences actually shape our lives. And a direct quote here is, "We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, but the meanings we give them is self-determining."
Yeah, so Freud was more along the lines of, it was called etiology, which is cause and effect. So like something that happened in the past affected something in the future. But Adler was more along the lines of like here and the now, like in the purpose aspect of things. So another aspect of this way of thinking is emotions are fabricated to achieve personal goals. So when you say, for example, a mother is yelling at her daughter, she is using that anger to fulfill the goal of wanting to assert kind of dominance, or that hierarchical structure above her daughter. So like if someone would call her on the phone and it's someone she recognizes, her tone would switch immediately. And then she would go right back to yelling. So that kind of indicates that emotion is really fabricated.
Yeah. And Adler's idea was that people are not bound by past emotions or experiences. Happiness actually stems from moving forward towards self-defined goals rather than being driven by past cause.
Yeah. The next thing here was kind of understanding oneself is crucial for changing, because the first step of change is really self-awareness. If you're able to reflect on your life choices, then you can influence your decisions moving forward.
And that's when kind of the idea that unhappiness is actually a choice. How many times have you been unhappy and you're like, I'm just unhappy at the world, I'm just mad at the world? But actually what's going on is it's your choice. And no one desires being evil, but personal justification undermines every single choice that you make. And the concept of good is subjective and tied to the individual benefit that it has.
Yeah, and resistance to that change is common. People choose how their lifestyles are carried out, and this, he argues, are usually determined from the age of 10. People want to stay within their little bubble because that fear of moving outside that bubble is too big to influence them to want to try to go experience new things or try to conquer new things.
Yeah, and life decisions occur in the present moment rather than the future or the past. And individuals tend to dwell on the possibilities rather than actually acting on them. And change is necessary for growth. Without change, you're not going to be able to grow. Regardless of past experiences, one determines their own life moving forward. Whatever has happened in the past, that's in the past. Like Marcus Aurelius said, it's a log that's thrown into the river. What does it do? It goes downstream. It's gone. So you need to move on. And that's the only way to really experience life for what it is to be able to keep moving. And that's kind of what the whole idea was when he says, regardless of past experiences, one determines their own life moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah, then moving on to the second night here, the title of that night was All Problems Are Interpersonal Relationship Problems. So dislike from oneself stems from focusing on shortcomings. Isolation doesn't resolve problems. Viewing self-dislike as a virtue can lead to a cycle of negativity.
Loneliness is defined by social context. All problems are fundamentally relational. Individuality is shaped on social context, emphasizing the importance of relationships. Think about your parents, for example, right? The kind of culture that you grew up in will kind of determine how your relationship with your parents actually is, and that relationship actually moves on to friendships with people. And it's kind of interesting seeing how everything kind of works together and flows together simply by how you were brought up and the kind of social construct that you were born into.
Yeah. And moving on here, superiority often masks undressed inferiority, connecting both of these complexes. So he argues that like the feeling of inferiority is on the low end of like a good thing because it helps us to keep moving forward, to keep pursuing those next goals. However, if we let those, if we're not able to take that step forward, that's where that inferiority complex comes into play. You're stuck in a like a constraints that you're not able to move past, and that's where that complex arises from.
And to kind of add on to what Landon was talking about, life is not a competition, right? Personal growth is the goal, not comparison of others. Why would you compare yourself to others when, maybe they're not even kind of what you want to be or where you want to go? One's own pace fosters a healthier self-assessment than anything else.
Yeah, and I think this kind of connects to like most of the time people see like climbing the stair steps and other people looking down, or you're climbing faster than other people's. But Adler argued it was more of a flat surface that everybody was walking on, and their only direction is to go forward rather than backwards, and everybody's moving at their own pace, trying to get to ultimately like their max potential, you could say.
Yeah. So then moving on here, building relationships involves work, friendship, and love, which are essential for social existence. Successful relationships require effort and mutual respect to thrive. In order to have a good friendship, right, no one's going to be dominating the other side of the friend. It's mutual. You guys both have an understanding of why you guys like each other, whether it's mentioned or talked about. You guys both understand each other on a different type of level, you can say, I guess.
Yeah. Then going on to the third night here, discard other people's task. So I'll let Chris.
Yeah, the pursuit of recognition can actually hinder personal freedom. It was mentioned in the book, money is coined freedom, but interpersonal relationships is where true issues lie.
Yeah, because in the world, like loneliness only exists because there are only human beings. Even if you're isolated on an island with no one else around, you will like still hear that. You'll know someone else is out there, so that feeling of loneliness will ultimately arise. And then moving on here, living for the expectations of others is detrimental. Recognition leads to reward and punishment education, creating a cycle where actions depend on external validation. So there's a teaching in Judaism where that if you're not living for yourself, no one else will.
And so this is where the idea that understanding how to separate tasks really unfold. Um, Determine those tasks is by asking who will benefit from the results of a decision. Attempting to force change on others disregards their intention and may actually provoke resistance from what you're trying to get done.
Yeah, I think we like drill into that notion of separation of task real quick. So everybody has their own like what could you say there? Everyone has their own responsibilities that they're kind of required to take out. So you think of when you go give a presentation, your responsibilities are to prepare beforehand, know the material, have a good slide deck, etc. That's your task. The other people's task, if say for example that someone laughs in the back of your classroom, you shouldn't get embarrassed by that task because it's not yours, it's theirs. So why does it matter what their task is?
You have no control over what their alternative task or motive actually is. So why would you even worry about what they're thinking or what they're doing?
Yeah. Like discarding others' task ultimately simplifies one's life. Believing in others is your task. Intervening in their responsibilities adds unnecessary burdens.
And to add on top of that, the desire for recognition restricts freedom, right? Constantly seeking approval limits one's ability to live authentically, and loyalty to others should not be a compromise for personal desires.
Yeah. True freedom involves the acceptance of being disliked.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's the ultimate title of the book.
It's a message.
Yeah. One of the key concepts of that Adlerian psychology. And then embracing the possibility of disliking is essential for personal happiness, because without it, you're always going to be trying to fulfilling someone else's agenda. And if you're trying to fulfill someone else's agenda, how is that ultimately going to reflect back on your own fulfillment or happiness?
And to add to that, ultimately you control the dynamics of interpersonal relationships. By separating tasks, individuals realize that they hold the power in the relationship rather than surrendering it to others. Acknowledging personal responsibility is crucial for overcoming life's challenges.
Next here is the fourth night, where the center of the world is. In Adlerian psychology, the mind and body are interconnected. So tension in the mind can manifest physically, affecting one's body. So he used the example of someone blushing when they get nervous, before they go up and talk to someone they like, or a presentation or anything like that. Ultimately, the tension in your mind is what's being reflected in your body's appearances or like actions in a sense. So by being able to resolve that tension in your mind, you can do away with
the
feelings, embarrassment or the outward appearances.
Yeah, and the goal of interpersonal relationships is a feeling of community. The ultimate aim of interpersonal relationships is to foster a sense of community. Community feeling or social interest encourages the desires to share and contribute to the welfare of others. What's good for me is what's good for you. And what's good for you and me is good for everybody. And Adler believed that community encompasses just not humanity, but the span of all time, highlighting the importance of connection. And the smallest unit of community begins with the individual relationships, transitioning from the self-attachment to concerns for others.
So I got two things to stem off of that. One is that smallest unit of you and I is the foundation of community.
Yeah.
That goes back to all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. So that smallest unit, if something's wrong there, then it's ultimately going to trickle out to the broader community. Second is going back to Marcus Aurelius, you were as an individual, you are a part in a greater whole, and that greater whole is humanity.
Yeah.
So you're like the arm to the rest of the body. You still contribute positively to that overall experience and what the body's ultimately trying to carry out.
It's not all about you, it's about the bigger picture.
Yeah. And that kind of goes right into our next point. You are not the center of the world. Every individual is part of a larger community, and a sense of belonging is a fundamental human need. While the individual is important, they are only one member of the greater whole. So like that arm of the greater body. So you kind of have to view the community as a globe with multiple centers. So take a map, a flat map. You could go and very easily find the center of the map.
Mm-hmm.
But community is more like a globe. So you could go point to any place on the globe. So you point in China, that could be the center of the globe. But you also could point in Mexico. That's also the center of the globe. It's all just how you look at it. So true belonging to that sense of community requires active engagement, ultimately focusing on what one can give rather than going into it thinking, what can I gain?
Yeah. And this brings us to the next point. Do not rebuke or praise. Building horizontal relationships where individuals are seen as equals rather than having authority over somebody is crucial for the cooperation and the harmony of everybody, not just yourselves. And praise actually creates the idea of the vertical relationship dynamic, where one's personal judgment of someone else's abilities often fosters the feeling that they hold more power over top of you rather than everybody is equal. And establishing equal relationships eliminates the grounds for that inferiority complex to develop.
Yeah, it's like the vertical relationship aspect is like if me and Chris are working in our company,
Yeah.
and I say to him, you're such a good helper. That ultimately puts him to like a bottom rung, and you could see that hierarchy take place. But if you more along the lines of like thank you or like that helped tremendously, you're more seen as equals in a sense. Then that goes back to kind of one of his points, are all humans are equal but not the same.
Yeah.
So you have to treat everybody with those horizontal relationship, which I thought was an interesting point because he argues not to praise, right? But in How to Win Friends and Influence People,
talk about praise a lot.
I talked about praise a lot and how it can really.
I think that it really depends on the situation, right? If you're trying to get something out of someone, right, praise them all you want, right? Get what you need to say. But in the all good of the community and the society, there shouldn't be really very much praise, because ultimately it gives a feeling of you're belittling somebody, right? You have more power, you have more authority, you have more say in what goes on, rather than this person that you just praised or belittled.
Yeah. So rather than praising, he argues to take the encouragement approach. So rather than instructing others what to do, assistants should empower individuals to take ownership of their own task. So that's like, say Chris was asking help for his homework. Rather than me just doing it for him, he's not going to learn anything.
Mm-mm.
I could instill in him the confidence that he would be able to feel
confident
in carrying out his homework and going forward with his test. So that encouragement fosters more autonomy in others, aligning with Adler's philosophy.
And this leads to the fifth night, to live in the earnest here and now. Excessive self-consciousness stifles the self, right? Understanding the difference between self-acceptance and self-affirmation. The shift from one's self-interest to concern for others, right? You got to have a concern for others, the social interest of all, to foster a good sense of community is important to truly understand the difference.
Yeah. And going forward here, there's three essentials for change that work in a circular motion here. So the first one is self-acceptance. Focus on changeable aspects of self while accepting what cannot be changed. So that's like, there's a prayer like the Christians do called the Serenity Prayer, and it's, God grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that's of very utmost importance because you have to control the controllables, essentially. So as soon as you're more able to accept yourself, then you are able to instill confidence in others. And that's the second thing for change here. And that's cultivating unconditional belief in others, which enhances relationships. Because say I doubt you, like, or say you're in a relationship with a female, essentially, and you have doubt that she's like cheating on you.
That's doubt that she's faithful.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry that. But every little thing now is going to be evidence of that. You're going to seek that out. So if you don't have the 100% confidence in her, then your relationship isn't going to be able to be built any farther than the ground level.
You're just looking for things that fit your narrative.
Yeah.
Oh, well, she did this, so she has to be cheating on me, or she didn't do this. She didn't tell me good morning or tell me good night, so she must not be interested. It's just you kind of play that own little mind game, and 10 out of 10 times that every time you play this mind game, you will lose. Right? It's your mind. It knows you better than you know yourself. And so that goes into the. Did you talk about the contribution to others?
No, that's exactly what the confidence in others. Like once you have that 100%, you know that you put all of your faith in others, then it leads to
community
contribution to others.
Okay.
And recognizing that personal value ultimately comes from contributing to the community.
And then going on from there, the difference between trust and confidence. Trust relies on conditions. Confidence is unconditional belief in others, even in the face of potential adversity or however else you want to state it.
Yeah. So trust is more like a bank. Someone comes in for a loan and they're like, I'll trust you with this loan because I know you can pay that back. And that's it. Confidence is like, no matter what they do, if they end up taking advantage of you, that's okay. Like you're willing to ultimately accept that, because how often or how likely are they to continue to do that if you continue to show that unwavering faith in them? And that's kind of goes into this next point, is the fear of exploitation. Overcoming this fear requires that self-acceptance aspect. So you can see how all of these three aspects are interwoven, leading to a better understanding of interpersonal dynamics.
And then this moves on to the essence of work is a contribution to the common good. Community feeling, what is that? Achieving a sense of community necessitates self-acceptance and confidence in others in the act of contributing. Self-awareness, however, accepts oneself enhances the ability to encourage meaningful with others, like your relationship with others.
Yeah. Next here is workaholism is a life lie. So what's a life lie? I think it's something that you tell yourself that you think is true, but it's really not.
This is a great point for you to talk about. So I'm just interested in hear your thoughts and ideas behind this.
Awesome. So,
well, time out here. He is a workaholic. He has very little free time because he's just so busy on working on. What are we working on right now?
I think this is where it's a little different in that aspect. Okay. So that's like, say you go to work and you work very long hours, and instead you have like family dinner every night at 6, but your job, like, yes, you're extremely busy at work, but you make that excuse like, I'm so busy at work, I can't make it home for family dinner. So,
but what happens when you bring work home?
Well, he's using work as an excuse to not go to.
I'm asking you.
I think work has to be interwoven with your personal life.
What about work-life balance, or like balance of activities and things like that?
That's where it goes into like your micromotives and what do you ultimately want out of your experience? Because ultimately, life is the meaning that you give it. It's meaningless unless you give it a meaning. Yeah. And I think like ultimately you're putting yourself in that situation anyways, because if you are a workaholic, you're using that to fulfill some goal. what goal is that? I think that's something that's a little deeper, and you have to dig inside of yourself to find.
Okay, so that brings to the next question. Are you happy? And if not, can you really be happy right now?
Yes, you can be happy right now. And he argues happiness is community feeling, or that contribution to others, right? Like, I think that's what he boiled it down to. It was a very simple thing. And genuine happiness stems from feeling useful to others, regardless of the visibility of that contribution.
And this actually brings us to the next point here, which is the two paths traveled by those wanting to be special beings. Striving for uniqueness. Individuals may engage in behaviors, either good or bad, to kind of gain attention or to kind of separate themselves from others. So what does this ultimately mean for Ichiro, or what does he talk about, is to be the courage to be normal, right? Normal is kind of a social construct, right? Nobody really knows what normal is, but the Socratic paradox, no one desires evil, right? The problematic behaviors may be misinterpreted as good accomplishments in children, for example.
Yeah, so just to kind of dig into that a little deeper here. So those two paths, ultimately everybody wants to be that standout. Everybody wants to be that Warren Buffett, that Elon Musk, but those are few and far.
They're special beings.
Yeah, but on a more minuscule scale here, so just take your high school. You have your star athletes, your star academics.
Yeah.
But then once those some other kids that aren't able to achieve those feats because of their
genetic makeup,
or like
personal ability.
Yeah, all those things. Then they go the opposite direction, and they want to gain that attention from negative acts, in a sense. So that's where the courage to be normal really comes into play. And I think that courage to be normal has a negative connotation to it, but in reality, it's not negative. Like, ultimately, you're still going to be working on your thing. If you make it to that stardom, you could say, then amazing, but that's very rare. So if you're not at that stardom, then you're can be classified as normal. Then the next point here is life is a series of moments. So most people see it as a straight line. So from the bottom of the mountain, top of the mountain, I'm here. I want to be
there.
I'm here. I want a law degree. Okay. So that there's a straight line that most people see. But he argued that it's more like a straight line drawn with a piece of chalk. So still looks like a straight line, but if you look at it under a magnifying glass, it's a bunch of little dots. So you have to view life as a series of moments rather than a straight line, which allows for appreciating the present. So you have to like dance through life, is kind of the phrase he used. Life should be approached as a dynamic journey rather than a destination, which goes back into what book was?
The Dark Horse Mindset.
Yeah, the Dark Horse Mindset. Awesome. Thank you for filling that in.
And then, so you should really shine a light on here and now. Focus on the present. Emphasizing the present helps one take actionable steps toward a fulfilling life. And as, again, the Dark Horse Mindset, it's all about fulfillment. What you find fulfillment in is the journey, rather than the destination. And one of the greatest life lies is living in the present, right? The biggest deception is neglecting the present moment. You should really embrace the here and now for a complete life experience, rather than really thinking about where I want to be, where I'm at. I'm going to draw a direct line, exactly how there are little points or little dots. Again, the Dark Horse Mindset, right? Trying to go up to a mountain range, and you find the summit, or what you thought was the summit is not really the top of the mountain, right? So you have to kind of change your direction or change your life path. And so you should really be trying to live here and now rather than think about the future far out.
Yeah. Kind of going off of that, I thought a good analogy he used was like standing on stage. When you're just standing on stage, you can see everything behind you, all the crowd in front of you. So that can kind of connect to, you can see the past and the future. And that's why you can worry about it, because like if there's a crowd out there, it's going to make you nervous looking out into the future. But if that spotlight's on you, you're only going to be able to see light in front of you. So that's where that shine light on the here and now really came from. And that wraps up our the main summary of the Courage to Be This Light. It's a very deep book and a lot of like deep philosophical.
It's very intellectual.
Yeah, very intellectual. So please go check out that book because we probably only scratched the very surface.
Yeah, it's one of those books that you kind of have to read a chapter, take your notes on it, and then reread the chapter again to fully encompass what's really being talked about in order to really pull the nuggets out of the golden nugget.
Yeah, it's just really tough to explain it or put into words.
Yeah.
So moving into our implementation here, I'll let Chris kick us off.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to try to make more or really establish more horizontal relationships rather than vertical ones. And that was a big emphasis in the book. Right. Vertical relationships really don't provide anything good for the community, you could say. And think about all your best relationships with people. They're horizontal ones, right? No one has authority over you, and no one has more power than you do. You guys are equals, but different.
Yep. And I think for this week, I'm also going to try to stem off of that. I'm going to look for, like, throughout work, school, like personal relationships, I'm going to try to find like where that the wording being used kind of indicates a vertical versus a horizontal relationship, and see what I can do to kind of not manipulate the interaction, but kind of work towards that horizontal.
See who praises you. See who
and see like that the feeling behind, like if there's like, oh, you did such a good job, and they're
is
like,
it sincere or is it just trying to belittle you to an extent?
Yeah, and then working to figure out like why that is, or why that makes me feel good when it really shouldn't, because that goes back to like that feeling of inferiority. Mm-hmm. Like you're looking for that praise.
Yeah. So this takes us into our favorite quotes. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah. So mine was, the first step to change is knowing. So in order to like implement any of this, you have to understand the concepts behind it. And if you're not exposed to that, how are you supposed to know what to do? So I thought that was amazing, because everyone should be on a lifelong learning journey, because if you don't know, how are you going to change positively?
And I guess one of my quotes to go directly with his is, the more you read, the more your knowledge actually increases. That's exactly why we're doing this, right? We're just trying to learn. We're trying to grow as people, as individuals, and hopefully help our community at some point in the future.
And just to add off of that, towards the end, he mentioned that it takes, to understand these concepts fully and make sure you're implementing them, it takes half of your life. Mm-hmm. So just like with anything else, it takes time. It's going to take time to implement this podcast, the books we are reading, the classes we're studying, the work experiences we have, all the above.
Yeah, we're 20, 21 years old, and so we have a lot of time ahead of us to actually be able to implement and really see the difference in the way our life
transforms.
Exactly. Another one of my quotes here is, answers from others are nothing more than a stopgap measure, right? They have no real value, right? So when you're asking for other people's opinions, first off, why ask for someone else's opinions? They don't know your life the way you know your life, and so their advice and their opinions aren't going to directly really add any value to what you're seeking. And so I love that quote, and that actually might be another implementation that I try is, why ask for others' opinions when you're the only person who really knows yourself?
I think that's good in a sense, but I think they can offer a different perspective that you didn't think of.
Okay.
I think what's good about what you're saying is, you shouldn't take what they're saying, and like if there's someone you highly respect and they say something, like that shouldn't be like the thing you follow like word for word. You still have to make your own decision.
Okay.
Yeah. And think about like that different perspective, but ultimately like it's your decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. So next week's book is Make Your Bed by Admiral William H. McRaven. It's a shorter read, but it's packed with a lot of good information and short stories where we can take away good insights. So we're looking forward to reading that.
Cannot wait. Well, thanks for tuning in.
Yep, that wraps up episode 12. Yeah, like Chris said, thank you all for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, our socials, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify are bound to improve. So thanks again.
Awesome.